The Bureau of Land Management's plan for 1.6 million acres in central Wyoming could cost Sweetwater County millions of dollars. Members of a small Cheyenne church step in to save homeless from this week's freezing conditions. And frosty flowers decorated Boysen Reservoir over the weekend. We'll take a look at these stories and more today from Wyoming's largest news organization. I'm Wendy Corr for Cowboy State Daily. If the Bureau of Land Management's plan for the Rock Springs area goes through, it could cost schools in Sweetwater County millions of dollars. Cowboy State Daily's Mark Hines reports that the county could lose 74% of its tax revenue from oil and gas development under the BLM's preferred alternative B of its Rock Springs Resource Management Plan, or RMP. That could hit the schools and sheriff's office especially hard.
Sweetwater County brings in like millions and millions of dollars in energy revenue, ad valorem tax money every year. And of course, their schools and their sheriff's office really depend heavily on that. And so from their perspective, they're worried about that drying up and going away because as they see it, the BLM's proposal is just too restrictive on energy development and would just hit them too hard in that aspect.
Among those crying foul over the BLM's proposed Rock Springs Resource Management Plan are Wyoming trona miners who say restrictions on development could kill their industry. Energy reporter Pat Mayo says the plan could put billions of dollars in future economic development at stake.
These rules would affect us like 3.5 million acres of land, and a really small fraction of it is done with trona mining and production, turning it into soda ash. They're concerned that in the future, if these BLM rules are enacted, it'll limit access to the land, one, and two, their ability to lease and bid on new land to develop.
Wyoming's mines annually produce roughly 18 million tons of trona based on the most recent figures available. When temperatures plunged well below zero last weekend and Cheyenne's emergency homeless shelter was overflowing, a Cheyenne church opened its doors to more than 30 homeless people. Cowboy State Daily's Claire McFarland reports that the True Vine Community Church on Central Avenue announced its intention to help on Facebook Friday, and transients began trickling in.
A few, like 4, came in with frostbite. Their hands were bubbling and flaking and ashen and discolored, and they took one to the hospital. They got a couple from the hospital. So this church, the pastors said that the congregation is only about 30 people. So it's a really small church that managed to pull this off.
This is the second time True Vine Community Church opened its building to Cheyenne's homeless. The first time was last year after a handful of transient deaths in Wyoming's capital city in the winter of 2021. And the congregation vowed never to let that happen again. I'll be back with more news right after this.
The weather is turning oh so frightful this time of year, but those excavation projects, they will persevere. I'm Jan Warren for One Call of Wyoming, here to remind you that no matter how big or how small your digging project is, contacting 811 2 full business days before you begin is required by state law. So stay safe unwrapping presents, not utility lines. From all of us at One Call of Wyoming, happy holidays.
Well, although many areas of the state stayed below zero for more than 96 hours straight, it wasn't nearly cold or long enough to kill Wyoming's devastating pine beetle population. Cowboy State Daily's Mark Hines reports that, in fact, Wyoming will probably never get a strong enough cold streak to eradicate them.
It's going to take sustained temperatures of 40 degrees below zero or lower to kill off the pine beetle larvae. And, there might have been some short instances of it hitting 40 below in some of the mountain areas in some parts of the state, but not nearly enough.
The last truly nasty pine beetle epidemic ripped across Wyoming in 2007 and peaked in the 2010s. However, the Bighorn Mountains might be ripe for another big beetle outbreak. And on an ice fishing trip to Wyoming's Boysen Reservoir, a couple and their grandson stumbled onto a beautiful phenomenon. The lake was covered with a field of large crystals that looked like a sea of frosty sagebrush. Cowboy State Daily's Andrew Rossi said the frozen phenomenon, called hoarfrost, can create dramatic ice crystals and build up on almost anything in cold climates.
The hoarfrost that was seen at Boysen Reservoir grew out of the imperfections of the ice sheet. Usually hoarfrost is a sign that that ice shouldn't be stepped on because it's too thin, but the ice sheet they were on was between 8 and 10 inches. So it's a really unique phenomenon that was there for a moment and then gone the next.
And that's today's news. Get your free digital subscription to Wyoming's only statewide newspaper by hitting the subscribe button on CowboyStateDaily.com. I'm Wendy Corr for Cowboy State Daily.